Hello, everyone. I'm Calvin Woodham. I'm the incoming chair of Friends of African American Art Association at Telfair Museums. It's commonly known as FAAA. FAAA is a membership engagement group at Telfair Museums that focuses on African American art and culture. Friends of African American Art at Telfair Museums, commonly known as FAAA, was created by Dr. Walter O. Evans. Dr. Evans is a retired African American surgeon here in Savannah. He has amassed an incredible collection of African American art throughout his lifetime. The African American art collection that he donated to the Savannah College for Art and Design includes 500 paintings, photographs, sculptures, and more than 100,000 books and manuscripts.
Hi, I'm Sharonna Ray. I am a proud member of FAAA. I'm also a proud graduate of Savannah State University's Visual and Performing Arts program. Being in Savannah State's Visual and Performing Arts program allowed me to dibble and dabble in different mediums. I took painting, printmaking, sculpture, and bookmaking as well, and I fell in love with painting. What has made my experience so special at attending Savannah State is that I've had the opportunity to network with other creative individuals who are on the same creative path of finding their visual voice. It's very important to me to continue to raise awareness of the talent that has emerged from this program. Being a proud member of FAAA has given me the opportunity to build a camaraderie with other creatives. It's also given me the opportunity to showcase at world-class museums here in Savannah while also remaining connected to my alma mater.
I'm a local artist here in Savannah, Georgia. I'm originally from Wrightsville, Georgia. I've been living and working in Savannah, Georgia for the past 30 years. And I'm one of the participating artists of the FAAA 2021 at Savannah State University show here at the Kennedy Center Fine Arts Building. The piece that I have in the show here behind me, as you see, is titled Outside Looking In. Quite often as artists, I think we are always on the outside looking in. And if you notice on the canvas here, there's sort of compartments, and there's sort of a window into each person's humble abode. And when you view the piece closely, you can see quite a bit of interaction that's going on. You sort of see one person perhaps watching television. He's all alone. You see one person who's probably teaching their children.
I'm a member of Friends of African American Arts, which is an arts organization through the Telfair Museums that my mother was one of the founding members of and former president. I am a photographer. I've been studying and practicing photography since I was 7 years old, and I have been going to FAAA meetings for longer than I can remember. For the past 14 years of the 25 years I've been practicing photography, I have been practicing photography as a nude portrait photographer, working with a little over 2,000 people, covering a wide range that overall aims to show that just because you're naked doesn't mean that your body's inherently sexual. By showing our humanity and by going back and forth between celebrating bodies of every different types to taking the nude portrait photography and making a story out of it, like something from Harry Potter, and creating these really mind-blowing, ethereal fantasy worlds that are still down to earth and in a way organic. And that's evolved over the years. I do glamour and I do the boudoir stuff too. But my goal is to show you that we are much more than just our skin. Growing up with FAAA, it has been different for me, I believe, than it has been for most people, because at first I was there because I wasn't given a choice. My mom said, hey, we're going, the meeting's happening. I was in high school at the time, she was the president. Where she went, I went. But I always enjoyed everything that we did. The outings, the trips to other museums, the lectures, meeting so many different artists. It's been a real privilege. And to see everyone's, not only see everyone's artwork and the diversity between everyone's artwork, but to meet the artists, to have conversations with the artists, to absorb all of that culture. Like when you say Black art, like Black art isn't one thing, it's a million different things. And bits and pieces of all of that, when we come together, like it influences my nude photography. And in my photography, in turn, influences other people. We're all going in one big circle in this huge melting pot, inspiring each other, and we're growing together. And one of the biggest honors that I've had of being a member of Friends of African American Art has been the privilege to be able to do art shows at the Telfair museums. And I look forward to doing many more. And I hope that my new portrait photography reaches you and it speaks to you. And I hope that you decide to join FAAA too.
FAAA was really formed to create diversity at Telfair museums. Dr. Walter O. Evans consciously made an effort to create diversity in this space, in this art space, this art museum. And I always tell people that you need to put your foot in the door. We all need to consciously make an effort to diversify our spaces, our homes, our community, our workforce, our workplace, our neighborhoods. And I really am proud to be part of FAAA because I feel it diversifies that museum space. It really helps to create a space for African American artists and anybody who appreciates African American art and culture to learn about the contributions of African American artists here in America.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. I would just got to see a little glimpse of the show that's currently up and some of the artists participating. And today we have a panel discussion with 5 additional artists whose work is currently being featured at Savannah State University's Kennedy Fine Arts Gallery for our annual Friends of African American Arts exhibit in collaboration with the Telfair Museums. This exhibit will run through March 30th, so there's still time to come by and see the exhibit. And today our guests include Kat Robertson, Vanessa Witham, Ruth Cohan, Lisa Rosenmeyer, and Akeem McMichael. And we have collected questions from Savannah State students that we are going to ask today. And I probably should introduce myself. I'm Dr. Kristen Clardy, and I'm currently the gallery's director at Savannah State as well. But our first question from our students is, they wanted to know from each panelist, so we'll go through one by one, what was your journey to becoming an artist? How did you come to find art making in your life? And we'll start with Kat.
Hi. Well, let's see. I'd say the art bug hit me or really saved me when I was in high school. My high school was a very turbulent time. It was in the 70s, and it was in Westchester County, New York. And the press used to say we were having race riots. We had such a small number of Black students that was like absurd. However, the school's way of dealing with it was to collect all of us, and we could fit in one classroom, all of the Black students in the school. They'd keep us in one classroom and keep us sequestered from the rest of the school. To save us, I don't really know. Nothing really came out of it. However, what I discovered for me, my sanctuary was the art department. And so I took every art class that there was. And when I needed to get away from the madness that was happening in the school, I would go into the art classroom and I would work on projects. At that time, I took every art class that was offered. So there was some sculpture, pottery, painting with oil and acrylic, and watercolor. And watercolor is what captured my attention. I found it fascinating. So I began to explore my interest in there. And also during that time, my mother started a theater company. That was her way of saving me, because really I was slowly going into this dark hole of just not feeling like I fit in anywhere. And the theater company, it was the Peekskill Drama Workshop. I don't know how many of you are familiar with Peekskill, New York, but Peekskill, New York has become an art mecca. Well, my mother's theater company was the first to introduce art to Peekskill. And the Peekskill High School actually had built a new high school. So the old high school had a stage that was not being used, and it became, or commandeered by my mother, to be the theater for our workshop. And we had artists from New York, from Al Benelli, come up and do workshops. We had Maya Angelou come and do poetry workshops. We went into the city we saw The Wiz on Broadway. I mean, we did a lot. But the beautiful thing about it was that it helped me discover that my artistic voice was not just a visual voice, but it was a physical voice as well. So that I learned to express myself through music, through theater, and through writing poetry. And my dabbling with watercolor led me to a project that I completed. It was in 2014. I wrote a book of poetry, and I illustrated it with my paintings. And some of those watercolor paintings were paintings that I had done before I started the book, and some of them were actually inspired by the poems in the book. But it was a real opportunity for me to just open up my voice loud and clear, because what I had found up until that time was that my artistic voice was being suppressed, because everybody in my world, my immediate world, was telling me, oh, I needed to be doing something else, that you're not going to make any money. You need to be doing something else. You're good at sales. You should be in sales. I never made money in sales, so I don't know where that came from. But honestly, they were trying to send me in all other directions other than the direction that was at the core of me. And that was my artistic voice. So, yeah, that's how it started. And it's still been developing and defining itself ever since.
Thank you. And our next question is for, same question for Vanessa. Tell us about your path.
So I'm originally from Bronx, New York, and I'm primarily self-taught. I had a few artists in my family growing up. My aunt and my uncle, specifically, my aunt was sort of a designer, painter, and then my uncle's actually a graffiti artist from the Bronx. But I never thought to pursue it as a career. I was in the Army, and then I ended up pursuing a degree in environmental science and English. So I just didn't, I think just like Kat stated, it wasn't something I thought like I would do. When I moved to Savannah about 7 years ago, I just fell in love with the wetlands. I fell in love with nature. I fell in love with just everything. Nature-wise, and wetlands specifically attracted me because the ecology part, of course, they're just unique areas that we don't necessarily appreciate enough. They don't look good. I mean, sometimes wetlands are stinky. They have all these twines and things we don't normally appreciate. And I think I just appreciate it because growing up in the Bronx, I didn't have nature. I didn't have any of that. It was just like buildings and hot concrete. And so when I moved down here, I just developed a love of the Southern culture and just I embraced it. Even as a first generation American, I just embraced, like, I saw everything. I appreciated the beauty of nature. And especially with today, with, identity and things like that, it's difficult for people to find identity sometimes. And for me, I think it was easy to find it through nature. I was always attracted to it as a child. And so I just began drawing and painting nature things. And I just found myself naturally merging with art somehow. I attended some classes in Savannah, and I met a wonderful portrait artist who was able to guide me and sort of teach me like painting from life. And so from there, I went into classical drawing. And so I did teach myself classical drawing. I taught myself everything I could get my hands on. Basically, if I met someone who knew, and I knew they were good, I was like, hey, teach me. And I went online, YouTube, everything. I just used what I could, and I sort of wanted to train myself to paint what I could. I wanted to be someone who could paint everything at first. But then I started to, I've always focused on nature and light and contrast. And so that's where I also took a class by an artist named Shang Wang. I love his work, and he does still life, from life and landscape. So I started sort of my style kind of is influenced by his work, where he paints from life and is sort of a mix of traditional classical realism, but implements sort of impressionism and expressionism. So painting from life and just like using realism and abstracting it. And so that's sort of where I fell in love with that style, and that's where I am now.
Thank you.
No problem.
And our next, would you share for us? Ruth, would you tell us about your journey to becoming an artist?
Sure. It's a long one. I really started in childhood drawing very early in my life. I'm a very visually oriented person. That's how I learn the best. And I was just encouraged by my family. We had friends who were artists, and that was my first kind of model of what an artist's life might be like. We lived in the New York metropolitan area, so I had access to museums a lot. I think the things that influenced me the most early on, like Vanessa was saying, were images of nature and being immersed in the natural world. I kind of, all my life, I just wanted to make stuff. So things that were found objects, stuff that was just lying around, often I would just put it together and make something. When I was in high school, I went to a high school. The family moved from New York area out to Detroit. And I was in a high school that was associated with the Cranbrook Institute for the Arts. I had a lot of opportunity in my high school to explore all kinds of media. My refuge was the weaving room. So I've had a taste of many different things. Again, in high school, I had opportunities for, rarely would a high school offer a live model for figure drawing, but because we were associated with this art institute, I had that opportunity. I had three-dimensional, some sculptural, some printmaking, and I remember having a conversation with my dad when it came close to graduation time, and we were looking at colleges, and he thought I was going to go and study math and engineering. I said, "What? I'm going to art school, Dad." Which I did. I went to undergrad at the University of Michigan, where I met a graduate student named Al Loving, who I think had gone on to become a rather well-known abstract expressionist painter. His work is very geometric, but his lesser known work, I think, was in collage. And that was something that appealed to me a lot. Like I said, I kind of have always collected things and put them together. So when I was in undergrad school, I majored in printmaking, and that there are a lot of technical aspects to that over time I kind of have moved away from. But kind of jumping ahead to post undergrad, in the late 60s and early 70s, I found myself back in New York, and there was a studio called the Bob Blackburn Workshop Studio, which was a cooperative. And an old family friend of ours, Ed Casarella, who was a printmaker, put me in the direction of Bob Blackburn's workshop. And that was a real lifesaver when I was living and working in Manhattan. Just, it gave me an anchor. And throughout this, I had not really had a previous knowledge of Romare Bearden, and then Bob introduced me to Romare Bearden's work, and it was like just this amazing, magnificent, wonderful body of work that has been very influential to me. And I guess because I have a wide range of experiences, I've moved through a whole bunch of different kinds of ways of expressing. When I was a mom and my kids were growing up, we didn't have a lot of money, and so we would make things for ourselves, and engaging in artistic pastimes, being creative, was what we did for fun. So that's kind of been my path. I guess I call myself, in a way, a dilettante, because I try a lot of different media and different things that appeal to me at the time, and I may work at it intensely for a while and then move on to something else. So when we get to the next question about the choice of medium, I can talk a little more about that. But I moved to Savannah with my husband in 2004, and just been working at home, makeshift studio here and there. Mostly the piece that's in the show is a ceramic piece, and I came to clay, I guess, through Savannah, mostly through the city had classes at their art center, the old art center that was on Henry Street. And that's where I kind of started with my clay work and pursued it since.
Thank you. And I believe next is Lisa.
Okay. Well, like many of y'all, started off, drawing as a kid, whatever we got our hands onto, but I never really thought that I would ever become an artist or anything. Kind of like Kat was saying earlier, everyone kept saying, get a real kind of life, a real job, this isn't something you pursue. It wasn't until, about 10 years ago, and a shift in the job career and the encouragement of a right person who happened to love my work. So what are you doing? And I started hanging artwork. The first place I hung a painting ever was in a coffee shop. And then somebody else saw it and said, oh, it's kind of cool, and encouraged me to go somewhere else. And, for the first few years, of course, nothing sold. And I had to work really crazy to keep getting people just to put my work out in front of people. And then about 6 years ago, then I've really finally truly started calling myself an artist and being able to really enjoy the benefits of that. And It's just been a winding journey that you start off going one way and you end up somewhere else. Sorry, my answer is really short.
No, thank you. That's wonderful. And Akeem, what do you have to share with us about your journey?
Alrighty. My journey started when I was very young, a child. As long as I can remember, I've been drawing, painting, doing something with art, making something creative sometimes out of nothing, or sometimes just a simple pencil and paper, because that's what we had. And so I can remember coloring in daycare and stuff like that. And I was never one of those color in between the line type of kids. So I would make things different colors that weren't the color that they normally supposed to be. So that's my first sign of creativity, and also just having a creative family. I have a father that painted, an uncle that painted, and just my brother that used stuff. Here we would always create stuff together. My mom has a crazy, crazy fashion sense. So her blending colors in real life, it just kind of went down to me on paper. It's kind of like I want to put that on paper, and then it transitioned into canvas. And then when I learned about clay, I was like, I want to put that same stuff on clay, but I don't have a, something to fire my clay in now, so I don't really stick with clay right now anymore. But it's still turning. It's the whole concept of turning nothing into something sometime, or just a thought into something and putting it on paper to describe it. So all my life I've been creating, whether it's with visual art or performing arts, is just always trying to sometimes putting my performing art on a canvas or on paper. But it's also, I want to make sure I send a message in everything that I do. So even if it is abstract, most people are like, well, abstract doesn't have a meaning. It's gonna have a meaning in it. Or I call myself a solid abstractor, because I'm going to use a solid shape that most people will know, but I'll put it in the abstract form. Or I would do a collage piece that have so many different things that is abstractly put together, but it has a message behind it. So my whole life I've been an artist. That's just my journey, making sure I create things as much as possible, making sure I spread a message.
Thank you. So the next question that we had, many of you have addressed in your opening question. So I wonder if there's anything if there was something you wanted to elaborate on. So I'll just let you volunteer if you want to add to this question rather than going through each of us. But is there anything to add about your choice of work and medium? We've heard a lot about how they have changed over time. And we've heard examples of how access to the facilities or the equipment also has influenced what medium you've worked on too. Is there anything else to add?
Well, I would like to say that I chose watercolor because it was a very portable medium. I would always have my sketchbook with me, and I am taken by the sky and water. And so many of my paintings focus around those themes. I lived on a sailboat for a number of years. And so what I discovered is that I could start a painting. I would usually sketch something that I saw and then start to paint it. And the sun was so hot, it would dry everything right away. So I could just keep adding my layers and watch the painting come to life. So I found that to be exhilarating for me. I would be able to actually start a painting and sometimes sit with it long enough to bring it almost to completion. Now, I don't do that all the time. Most of the time, my paintings take a long time for me to work on. That's relative, that long time, but I used to have to walk away from it and come back to it again and let the painting speak to me as it's coming to it's developing itself off the paper. But yeah, I love watercolor. I think watercolor is fascinating for me. I um, took a couple of classes in New York City a couple of summers ago and learned that some of the things that I was discovering were techniques that were being taught. So I kind of found my way on my own, trying to use watercolor with on different paper and seeing what happens with watercolor when you don't paint watercolor on paper that's not designed for watercolor, and how I could use the color of the paper as part and integrate it into the actual design. So yeah, watercolor is the medium of choice for me.
Yeah, as in pertaining to the medium choice that I have, I use acrylic only. Um, and the reason I came, a lot of people say, well, why aren't you doing oil painting? That's, the really right way to do it. And it was that I had taken once an oil painting class and found out that I was extremely allergic to the medium. It actually placed me in the hospital. And so from there, then I was like, okay, I can't do oils. And so I adapted anything that I had learned from that class over to the acrylic medium. And having to build certain layers and stuff within my work, I'm known for the levels of blending that I can do with some of my pieces. As for how I choose what I choose to create and everything, a lot of times I'm thinking about what's happening in a lot of times even the society and the culture around me, and wanting to express or connect with people on a more emotional and intimate level. And a lot of times I'll choose imagery that is more of a universally accepted or anybody can relate to, because it's very important to me to sit there and be able to have a discussion with anybody, regardless of how we look on the outside, and to definitely respond to us as humans on the internal level. And so I spend a lot of my time thinking about the psychology of people, our behaviors, and how to give back to people in a comforting way to basically kind of unite us as a group.
I'm not sure, is this a question about the medium of choice or choice of subject? I wasn't sure.
Sure. We're still open to any responses about medium before
Oh,
we move
okay.
on. But
So I'll speak briefly. So for me, I started with charcoal. I started drawing, classical drawing with portrait drawing, and then I like to use the charcoal underneath the oil painting. So I still use charcoal, but I started off with acrylic because it was cheap, and it was just you could it was easy to wash my brushes with. It was just easy to work with. So I started learning from there. I didn't know anything about painting when I first started art. It was just charcoal drawing for me. I started drawing for years, and it was actually a good thing because an artist told me before you go into painting, you should know values, you should know charcoal, you should know drawing, and then move on to paint. So it actually worked out. I would be someone who would see a tree and just everything was the same color, one brown, green, one shade of green, one shade of brown. I didn't really know about values and tones and what colors clashed or didn't, and it was through time and experimenting that I sort of ended up there. And then now I see myself, I have a bunch of acrylic paint still and I still use it from time to time, but I see myself going more towards oil. It's just such a beautiful luminescent medium, and it's just, especially if you're working as a representational artist, um, there's nothing like it. There's no much, I'm really fascinated by the old masters technique and things like that. And so there's the luminosity is just there. You can't really get that with any other. And I think because it's the drying time, it forces you to step back and contemplate the medium. It forces you to think about what you're going to do before you actually keep going. And it's very forgiving as well. So there's so much to play with there. And so that's why I chose oil as my primary medium.
I'll just say a couple of things. My choice, I was actually undergrad trained as a printmaker, and I really enjoyed the printmaking. I liked the fact that you could make multiples of things. But printmaking has a huge amount of equipment and volatile chemicals and things that are not very healthy. So I abandoned that fairly early on. I think I would echo what Kat says about portability of materials. I think collage has been a theme that's stuck with me for a long time. Because the materials are cheap, they're readily available, and I can pick up a magazine and chop it up and reassemble it and call it art. As I said, I came to clay pretty late and have enjoyed doing that. And recently, because I haven't had access to a kiln, like Akeem said, I've started digging out some of my old small pieces of clay and trying to combine them in collage. I don't know if you can see it, but there's a small piece back here on the wall behind me of a piece of sculpture that has been incorporated into a collage. And so now I have a little workroom studio in my house, and that's where I'm going, just taking old stuff and reassembling it into new stuff.
All right, excellent. Real briefly about mine, if well, I'm just gonna do that, have a visual background, but that's my piece right there itself. And I chose paper for this piece. Normally I do acrylic or soft pastels or chalk pastels, whichever one you want to call it. And I was like, I want to try something different. And I was walking through the store, and as a most artists would say, as a starving artist, we know that materials are very expensive sometimes. And I said, well, I was just walking around the store, and I was like, it walked past paint samples. I was like, well, that's free right there. So if you can't get better than free, I don't know what else to do. So I went and picked up some paint samples, and I was nice enough to ask, like, well, how many of these can I get? He was like, take as many as you want. And so I just had a whole stack full of them. Then I started going to other stores, took another handful of them. I even went to one store. They thought I was stealing something because I had bags full of things that they didn't see that I checked out. So I was like, this is a real interesting experience. But I decided to use paper because again, it was different. It's something fun to do because you get to cut up things. It brings out the child in me, so I get to cut stuff, make a mess. This time I have to clean up my mess now, which I always have. So I don't have to mess up my mom's house. I'm messing up my house now and everything else. So I just chose paper because it was different. It's something new that hasn't been seen in the art world, and I'm always trying to do something different that hasn't been seen. So I stuck with paper.
Thank you. I also wanted to follow up with Ruth, and some of you also have worked in 3D, but what are the challenges and rewards of working in three-dimensional work? I'm specifically thinking too about the challenges in terms of display. That's often one that becomes really tricky.
Yeah. Like I said, I kind of discovered my enjoyment for doing three-dimensional work later in life. And I think the spontaneity of it is what really appealed to me. It's just clay is so responsive to manipulation. You touch it and you leave an imprint on it. You can manipulate it in so many ways. You can stretch it, you can pull it, you can pound on it, you can squeeze it, you can impress into it, you can, and if you don't like it, you can erase it and change it immediately. It's sort of like with clay, I can, if I think it, I can do it. And I like the fact that sculpture occupies that three-dimensional space, that it's not a flat plane. That it has weight and it has texture. The challenges had definitely been access to studio space and firing. So in order to answer that, I was lucky enough to have a couple of friends who had studio space and would let me use their fire my work in their kilns. The city arts the community arts building on Henry Street was the first place that I worked, and they were also nice enough to, quote, hire me to teach a couple of classes, which gave me even greater access. I'm also over 62, and in the state of Georgia, if you're over 62, you can take classes at any of the state schools for free. So I went to Armstrong and took all of the clay classes that I could at Armstrong in order to gain access to the studio. my purpose was not to be a student there, although there are definitely things that I learned. But that's the biggest challenge, really, is the studio space and storage.
Thank you. Very true. And Lisa has already started us off on our next question, which I think is really helpful. And often I find our students struggle with this when you're studying in art in college and in high school. You're constantly kind of given assignments, right? So you're being asked to create about something, and then when it gets time to thesis, students have not necessarily explored what they want to talk about in their work. And so we would love to hear from you about where your inspiration comes from and how you choose about what to make art about. And let's start with Kat.
Well, the short story is that nature speaks to me. I hear the voice of God in nature, and it compels me to want to try to duplicate, but not make it real like a photograph, but my interpretation of that beauty. So it's an ongoing challenge for me to try to capture movement in clouds, to try to capture movement in water. Um, and I'm inspired to do that because I see so much beauty around me. Sometimes I would take photographs of my work, of what I see, and then go back later and paint it. Or like the painting that is on display, a friend of mine took this photograph of this particular scene, and it just captivated me. There was so much going on in the sky and in the water that I had to attempt to interpret it the way it spoke to me. Um, I find that, and this may be going towards this next question, I don't know whether this is going to be a part of it, but painting, for me, expressing myself artistically is a visual as well as an audible, as well as a movement thing. So a lot of times emotions that I want to express will come through in a painting. I often like to find a way of expressing a feeling through something that I see in nature. Because I always believe that since a picture is worth 1,000 words, if I can capture an emotion in a painting, then that will say words that I don't have to speak. And in the visual poetry that I like to put together, the visuals, which are paintings that I've done, will speak to a certain part of the story that's being spoken in the overall piece. So yeah, I love to do skies and water and anything in nature. I got captivated by Georgia O'Keeffe's work with flowers, and when I went to Maui, the foliage was so incredible that I had to paint with every flower that I saw, and it was my interpretation of it. So I think, as my own style is emerging, and I'm trying to determine really what that style is, it becomes influenced by the artists that have spoken to me, like Romeo Bearden and James Denmark. I tried to play along with collage with those as well. But I also like, I can't think of his name now. It'll come back to me later. But different artist styles, I find, will affect some of the choices that I make when I'm painting.
Thank you. That's wonderful. How about you, Vanessa? Don't forget to unmute yourself.
Oops, sorry. I think the biggest thing for me is trusting yourself, trusting your own intuition. Of course, learn from everyone that you can possibly learn from. But at the end of the day, you have to become your own master. You have to become your own judge. You have to learn to decipher, to be judgmental, critique your work. Do not settle for less. Don't be afraid to toss a painting. Don't be afraid to leave a painting alone and come back to it. Don't overdo a painting. Sometimes a painting may just need to be left alone. You might not be in an emotional state to come to it. And trust yourself. Just let things go naturally. Sometimes you may feel like you may feel overwhelmed, or you may be harsh on yourself. You know, you're comparing yourself to, especially in a day where we live with social media. I think there's a tendency to judge our work based on what everyone else is doing and their success and supposed success, because again, it's social media. We post the best of ourselves. You don't really know that behind that one beautiful painting there's 20 that you don't see. You know, you have to constantly um, judge yourself. So I think it's important to really be aware of your own flaws, your own ideas, your own the way you think. What is it that, you know, makes me think the way I am? So I think there's a self-awareness at play always. And I think it's important to know when to stop, when to go, how, you know, and to kind of, you know, it's okay to block social media. It's okay to block everyone, you know, to kind of internalize what you want to do. Um, there's a lot of pressure today to do something, especially if you're a person of color, if you're a woman. You know, there's all these things that we're forced to constantly be and constantly do on a daily basis. We don't realize how much the environment affects us, and it's okay. That's why I think for me, just like Kat was saying about nature, I love turning to nature, because there's nothing there. It is, nature is, you know, there's no reason why it exists. There's no reason why our earth exists. It's there, and it's just a constant source of strength for me to know, hey, you know, the world, what everyone is telling me to be or do doesn't matter. What matters is this beautiful thing. And beauty is can be strange, it can be anything. So finding that voice and your intuition is key, and going with it, being confident. So that's what's helped me along the way.
Thank you. How about you, Ruth?
Well, I guess I started out doing very abstract work, two-dimensional in printmaking, and I've moved so far away from that. My sculpture is much more figurative and pretty much focused on a female form. I feel like as that our bodies and our experiences really have been informing my work a lot in the most recent past. And it's not that I'm trying to portray figures in a realistic way. It's more like an expressionist, I guess. I'm trying to pull that out of the clay. A couple of themes that emerge as I look back over time in my work are mythology and sometimes religious iconography. It's kind of interesting. When I was in grad school, I did my thesis on what I call personal iconography, and I think what I mean by that is that there are certain images and ideas that resonate with or have resonated with me over time, and they kind of persist. So they become my archetypes, my personal iconography. And it's kind of that I explore mostly these days. Themes of female form, particularly.
Thank you. And Lisa, you addressed some of this question already. Was there anything else you wanted to add, or should we move on to Akeem?
No. I did mention, you know, why I did what I did and how I chose to, but to let the younger students who are coming out from college and stuff, like you had mentioned earlier, they don't quite have an idea. When I first started going beyond just one or two pieces that people get to see, and it's like I had to learn how to do like a series of work and make something cohesive. One of the first series I did, I used actually just the color to make the exhibit cohesive, because I hadn't quite developed to that level yet of a much more complex way that I approach it now. Um, and so I started off a little bit more simpler on how to get my brain trained to think about that and bring myself forward. Then it would start off with maybe it would be something, with animals in it would be the thing that would unify, but it was a process to get to that point and develop that strength. So be able to speak over a broader body and just instead of just small series. It just took time. As for the style of my work, it changed a lot too. It was getting away from the influences of others and listening to myself, where I started off with much, much broader brushstrokes, a bit more impressionistic in the style. And I kept realizing I was having to fight that constantly. And so I just allowed myself to start tightening up in areas where it felt natural for me. And that gave my own internal voice, came out on what I was visually creating. So now when people look at my work, even if sometimes I will do something different than what's on the screen now, the house with the little child's toy, um, and I do something completely different where it might be a person, like the piece that's behind me, the same techniques and everything, the way I push through still can combine everything. So it's really listening to who you are and finding that beyond your college education.
Thank you. Akeem, what can you add to this conversation? Where do you find your inspiration?
I find my inspiration mostly through what I'm feeling at the time or what's going on in the community. A lot of the times I would take the same piece and do it multiple times, but in multiple ways. So, I mean, this is not the first Africa that I've had in an FAAA showcase, or when I showcase my art, the first Africa that I've done. It's just another way of interpreting it, because a lot of times I just sometimes just want to see colors come together. So it's just about that freedom of expression and what's in your heart, because what's crazy thing is outside of school and your own personal art, this is probably the freest art form that you can do. A lot of times I find myself when I'm doing my other performing arts, I'm trying to tap into those things to make sure I do a great performance. Versus this one is mostly what am I expressing? What do I want to put out there? This is how I feel. And so I stick to what message do I want to send? So if I want to send a message of positivity, I make sure I do a piece that's very positive. I don't want to send a message of negativity, so I can't say I do a negative piece. But if I want to be a more social conscious piece, I will do a more social conscious piece to get the message out, saying this is how it is. Because as a male with a deep voice, the way I have it, it can come out very strongly to the wrong people when it's not the message I'm trying to send, or they might not hear it correctly because I do have such a strong, dominant voice, and I am black, and I am a male, and we have certain people who feel that we are subservient. So with my piece, you would never know what color I am, what gender I am, or anything like that until you actually read the artist. I've sold pieces to people that are not my race, even though the piece was particularly about my race. And so it was just sending that message of how we've overcome, how we are enjoying life, and everything else. And some of my pieces are celebrating life. So a lot of my pieces would be of people that are dancing, because I like to dance. So I want to express that and put that out there. So I make a piece about it, and it's in my heart to do it at that day and time. So I put it down. And again, I come back to it because sometimes I might not know the colors I want at the time, or sometimes again I would do the same piece 1,000 times just with different colors because I want to see that in that color at that time. So just doing what's in your heart to do.
Thank you. And now we'll move to our last question. What advice do you have for someone pursuing a career in the arts? Kat, we'll start with you. Any advice for our Savannah State students?
Wow. It's interesting. I was reading an article not too long ago about the value of artistic and musical careers in today's economy. And I don't know that I'm the person to answer that question to help a student to make a decision about whether or not to pursue it, but I will say this. Um, I honestly believe that we're all created creators. And we need to find that creative voice for us. Sometimes it's going to be in painting, it may be in music, it may be in dance, it may be in teaching, it may be in medicine, it may be in law, but we create. And so we need to discover, first of all, what is it important for us to create? What is it that unique acorn that's in us that no one else has, that needs to grow into the oak that you were created to be? What is that voice and what does it say to you? And I think as a student, you need to ask yourself that question, and then you need to spend quiet time listening for that answer. And not only look for that answer from within and from the spiritual sources, for me, it's the Bible, but whatever you need. But you also need to look at the world around you, because in nature, like I said, nature to me is the voice of God. It speaks, and it speaks in so many different tonations and so many different themes and so many different emotions that when you ask that question, if you listen for the answer, you will know what it is you are created to create. And then you can focus your energy on that. And if you can make a living at it too, bravo. And I think that today, at least more so today than when I was in school, you can actually take classes that will help you market your work so you can find um, an audience for your work. And let me just also just wrap it up for me by saying that although I'm inspired, and Van Gogh was the artist whose name would not come to my brain when I needed it at the time, but um, there are many different artists that inspire my work because I like many different artists. But in the end, when it comes time for me to sit before a blank piece of paper, I really don't want to be influenced by anybody or anything. I really want to see what comes out of me. What is it that I've got to say? How does that voice come make it manifest on that paper? So I think you need to trust yourself. I think you need to trust that the life that you've been exposed to is already giving you some things. And as you continue to grow and to live, you will continue to get inspiration and voices that will speak to you about what you need to say and how you need to go about saying it. And don't be afraid to experiment and find new ways of challenging yourself. I think that's the exciting thing about life, so that you continue to recreate as you continue to live.
Thank you. How about you, Vanessa? What can you add?
Well, I think I really like what Kat had to say about that as well. I think, yeah, so art can be many things for many people. For some people it's craft, for some people it's about, earning an income, for some people it's a hobby, for some people it's just like a quest for something more. And I think for most of us it's a little bit of everything. I mean, it's not just one thing. All of us would love for our painting to sell for $1 million, let's be honest. But I think at the end of the day, you have to really understand where you are. So you have to really love it. You have to have a passion for it, because if you go into it saying, I want to do this, and it can be that, hey, this is all about the money, and you end up being, it shows in your work. It will show eventually. I think if you love something and you're really passionate about it, honestly, it will work. You'll find a way to make it work. Um, and of course, there's so much resources today now more than ever, and you're able to connect with people, learn more marketing skills and that kind of thing. But at the end of the day, you really have to love and have a passion for what you do, and I think it will work out. And don't be afraid to do different things. You can combine art. The journey of one artist is not the same of another's artist. I mean, there's different things you can do. I mean, I actually on the side, I play guitar, and I do web design, I do web development, I'm into coding, I'm a nerd, I love gaming. I have like this other multiple side of me that no one knows. It's so weird because like, I'm an artist, but I'm also this, and I love literature. I love classical literature. I read on a daily basis. I go to bookstores. I'm always reading. I'm always learning. So yeah, be a human, be everything, and find that passion and find a way that it works for you. Don't compare yourself. Don't go, hey, this artist is doing this, but you are you. You have your own skills, your own environment that raised you. So yeah, don't focus so much on what other people are doing. Do what you do and follow that voice, and try to make it work for you, because there's no two artists that are alike.
Thank you. It's going to get harder as we go through for the last artist to find additional things to share. But Ruth, is there anything else you'd like to add?
It's really hard for me to talk about art as a career because that never really occurred to me as a possibility that I could actually make it a career. I feel like for me, it's been more of, I guess maybe Vanessa said it, others have said before, it's a journey. It's never been a money thing. It's never been about acceptance. And I've done other things to sustain myself and my family. And I've done the art for myself, I think, pretty much. So as far as a career goes, I can't really put those things together, art and career, for me personally. I think the things that Kat and Vanessa said are really true. All of it about finding your own images, your own voice, being true to yourself in that respect. And now there clearly are many avenues for marketing and people who will teach you how to market yourself. I'm not very good at that either. And it's not what drives me. It's the making that drives me.
Thank you. It's great. And let's see who's next is Lisa.
I have been a very, very fortunate and blessed artist that for the last 6 years, this has been my income. This has been it. But to get to this point in time, it was a heck of a journey. I would say, first off, you're not going to come right out of school and land selling $1,000 paintings right off the get-go. I mean, shoot, I was happy to finally have one hang in one coffee shop that no one knew about. But what you do is you find jobs that are associated with the things that you love. I have an artist friend who she loves plants and gardening, so she does that professionally, and it gives her inspiration for her spirit and soul. So when she creates artistically, that is brought into her work. Others have taken jobs as museums, teachers, various things until they can build their establishment up of people being able to see their work, becoming familiar with their work, to where eventually one day, well, many young artists strive for is that they can just sustain themselves on their work alone. But it is a long journey. Don't think you can come out of this gate, winning it right off the bat. But if you stay consistent, and the consistency isn't so much about consistency in your style, because that's going to evolve and change as you become more and more centered with who you are as an artist, like Vanessa and Kat and Ruth have already discussed. How Hakeem has talked about how he has taken his own personal journey and put those things forth. Those things will develop. The consistency is making sure that you're always there, you're always available, you're always pushing your art career. Even after you've done your job that's covering your current bills, you come home and you paint, you sculpt, you knit, however you're going to express yourself. You do these things consistently. And then you've got to make sure to find a way to market yourself, show that you're out there working. Even if you're doing just Facebook posts, this is what I made tonight, or this is what I finally finished up. It lets people know that you're there, you're creating, you're thinking, and you're sharing. So you also need to be consistent in your sharing to others in hopes that eventually the financial stuff will come. It's a long journey, but it will come. Learn how to manage your business, learn how to manage the money side of it, the stuff that stinks. Painting or creating so beautifully. But we also need to make sure that if we want to make this a full-time career, we got to be able to handle our money, and we got to understand how to manage it. We got to understand how to read contracts. Is this gallery owner going to be really representing me? Are they going to push my career forward? is the deal that I'm signing, is this beneficial to me? Because not all galleries are the same, and some of them you need to walk away from. And others, you're getting a very, very, oh, that's good when you get one of those good ones. So you got to be able to learn how to read a contract, understand what your legal rights are as you go forward in this. The other thing I highly want to encourage you as you go out into this world of the creatives, and even if you're just doing it to fulfill the joy in your heart and express to others, and you give everything away, that's beautiful too. But make sure that as you're looking and we watch things on social media, or we see our other the other people we've gone to school with, or other artists amongst us who are having successes, that make sure not to internalize that. Just because it's their success, do not let it become your failure, because it's not. They may be striving for a different goal. I think it was Vanessa had mentioned that some people are doing this more for a hobby or a craft, or the different styles of types of art out there. Some are more interested in graphic design, some are more interested in fine art, some are painters, sculptors. So if you have a friend that's a sculptor that succeeded in getting into a show, then yay, congratulate them. Don't internalize it as your failure. And I think that's something really important to walk away with as you go forward into this world.
Thank you so much. And Akeem, what would you like to add?
Okay, what I would like to add is start now. The first thing is love what you do. Love it regardless. If it's your career, make sure you love it. Love it, love it, love it. Now, with that, if you love it, start now. Don't think that you have to wait until you're out of school to do anything. I saw my first piece in high school, first two pieces in high school. It was and the word coming up, and I still use the word to today. If you're on your hustle, you have to hustle your work. Hustle it, hustle it, hustle. Go to art galleries, and again, what Lisa was saying, I didn't know anything about contracts. They just paid for these two pieces. I got my money. I was like, yes, I got paid for my art. But getting older, I learned some things that was great for them because again, I can say I'm a paid artist. Who can say that in high school? Not too many of my classmates could. Yeah. And so start now though. Get out and go to different places. I had a piece in a restaurant in downtown Savannah, uh, selling my art. That's how I sold a couple of pieces. Go to different places, make friendships where you see that art is being sold at. See if they have a price tag on their art. So I was like, oh, okay, so they sell art here. Ask how can you get your art here. Go to different shows and competitions. Do whatever you have to do to push your art out there, but also make sure you have intellectual what's rights to your property. Make sure that you share it as much as possible. Let people know it's yours. Sign it. Make sure you sign your art all the time so we know it's yours. Own your work. But start now. Get out there and go out there and sell yourself. Sell your art if that's what you want to do. If you're doing it, like I said, for the love of it too, make sure you love it. Make sure no one can take that from you. Do what's in your heart to do. Even though it's kind of hard in school, I got in trouble in school for not finishing my projects on time. So it's like, if you're going to get an F if you don't finish. I'm like, so let me hurry up. But love your art. Love what you do. And the main thing I want you to do is learn to accept the no's, but never find the no's acceptable. And not this kind of no's either, but the N-O no's. Accept the no, but never find the no, never let the no be acceptable. Because the yeses are always going to outweigh the no's. So go out there and just start pushing your work, pushing your stuff, and love what you do.
Well, thank you everyone for those wonderful pieces of advice for the future artists and active artists. Actually, many of ours are active in the community, taken some of these recommendations already under their wing. And we appreciate so much you spending time with us today. Again, the Friends of African American Artists annual exhibition is showcased at the Savannah State Gallery and Kennedy Fine Arts Building. It runs until March 30th, so there's still time to come and view it. It's open Monday through Friday from 9 to 5. And you can learn more about FAAA at Telfair Museum's website. And we appreciate everyone spending time with us. Thank you all, guest speakers. And we look forward to a day real soon when we can have a panel discussion with students there live, hopefully this time next year. Thank you, everyone.